Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic for you today. Let's do it. Regardless of your feelings of the occult or supernatural, what is your downright creepiest experience or story when you've been alone at night? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.
When I was younger, my sister screamed in the middle of the night and said she saw someone standing in a trench coat and hat standing at the edge of her bed. A few years later, I moved into the room because my sister left for college. One night I had a horrible dream, as if someone was watching me while reaching to touch my leg. When I woke up from this nightmare, I saw a silhouette of a young girl standing at the foot of my bed, reaching down towards me. I yelled, "Get away from me," not realizing what I was actually looking at. A second later, I came to the realization that it was someone or something standing there, and I jolted upward, and at the same time the figure fell backwards, but before it hit the ground it faded away. I didn't end up sleeping the rest of the night. Worst part about this story is that I've had sleep paralysis before, so I kind of understand what it feels like. And this was totally real. I now cannot force myself to sleep in a completely dark room alone anymore. When I was 23, I had a baby and would often go to my sister-in-law's house to spend weekends. She owned a house in North Georgia in the mountains. I often slept upstairs, but never had with my baby. Our husbands were off hunting, and I took my son to go sleep upstairs. When I laid down, I felt this overwhelming sense that there was an old woman staring at me. I felt her. I know she was there, and I felt she was interested in my son, and I freaked and grabbed my son and ran down the stairs to my sister-in-law and told her. She said she knew because her young daughters often said the same thing. When my son was there, we went to the same Sill house, only this time she had moved to another home in the same town. She was at work, and I had come early to hang out for the weekend, as at that point I lived in Florida. My son was playing with her washer and dryer, and he came to me and said, "That man said hello, Mama." I said, "What man?" He then proceeded to tell me the black man in the hallway. I told him I couldn't see the man, and he told me that he was standing there. I left. Finally, I think I had a bout with SP myself. I fell asleep on my back watching TV at some point. I felt like something was sitting on me. I knew I was asleep, but I couldn't move or scream. The more I tried, the harder it was for me to breathe. Then a white, bright-ass light was all I could see. I panicked and was finally able to wake up and ran to call, you guessed it, my sister-in-law, who calmed me down and came over the next day to sage, just in case. Probably late to the party, but maybe someone will see it, so here goes. We do. It's not my story, but my mom's and my brother's. They live across the street. It was in January when the Christmas tree was still standing. One night, they woke up at around 2 to the sound of something crashing down the floor. When my mom turned the lights on in the living room, she found that the tree fell on its side. Now, when putting it up, it was standing stable. Even me and my clumsiness couldn't topple it, so there's no way a slight shaking could make it topple. My mom went near the tree to stand it up and felt a slight shiver, as if someone was there. Cue my brother coming out of his room, going to inspect the tree, and he feels the same shiver. My family is somewhat into esoteria, and it turned out it was my late granny who toppled the tree as a message for my mom. A few years ago, I got into the shower. I began cleansing myself as usual when I heard a weird sound. It sounded like cackling. Wheezy cackling coming from a direction in which there was a wall. My brain extrapolates quite easily, so I hypothesized that I had hyenas in my bathroom wall. I attempted to converse with them, but they just kept laughing on as I applied my shampoo and conditioner. It only stopped when I turned off the shower. Okay, that's what I first thought of. But here's the real thing. When I was living in an old house, my bed was up against a corner of my room. There was this little crack between the bed and the wall, and when I looked at it with the lights off at night, silhouettes of monsters emerged from the crack. I was 6 or 8 at this point, and when I closed my eyes to shield myself from the monsters, they appeared in my mind, in full color. These totally bizarre yet realistic monsters were taunting me night after night. I couldn't escape them until I got permission to leave the lights on at night. They never bothered me again, and as long as I don't put my bed in the corner of my room, they never will. I was maybe 7 when it happened, but I went to go get some snacks during the night. I was groggy since I'd woken up. I remember that. I walked to the fridge and got some cheese, like from a pack of cheese, because I was a weird kid. I turned around and heard a faint hello. I said, "Mom?" Then everything went completely quiet. I went to the bathroom where I heard the voice, and then shit myself. There was something with red eyes and a smile that was unnaturally wide to be human. It looked at me, went up to me, and said, "I'll be right back, wait for me." Then ran through my wall, which would take you right outside, and never came back. Since then, I've never experienced something like that again, but just thinking about it still scares the shit out of me. My parents are not together, so every weekend I go to my dad's house. When I was about 5-ish, every time I looked out of the window of my bedroom at my dad's house, I always used to hear this godforsaken noise that sounded like it was perpetually falling. The noise only occurred both when it was dark and when I was staring at a particular building, which looked to be a decently sized facility of some sort. Around the same time, a close friend of mine completely disappeared without a trace. There was always a lot of weird shit going on surrounding her, which I won't get into too much detail about, but one thing I will share is this one particular incident where she was intended to visit my house after school, but upon the arrival of another classmate's parent, who regularly picked her up from school, she began to get a bit agitated and upset. To cut a long story short, she had to go with the other kid's parents, and she had a full-on breakdown in the car. Naturally, my 5-year-old self was very confused. Fast forward about 2 or 3 years later, and the noise completely stops, and the building, which I'll just call the facility from now on, goes quiet. No more lights, no more strange noises at night, nothing. I also find out that my friend's disappearance is because her father was domestically abusive toward her mother, which caused her mother, and her younger sister to move out of town. So I can at least rule out the possibility of being connected. About 3, almost 4 now, the relationship with my father breaks down, which causes me to not see him for a couple of years. In 2018, I randomly remembered the weird shit that happened at the facility and decided to look at it on Google Street View, only to find out it doesn't exist. For context, the facility looked like something you would see in the average English industrial park, whereas this new one was a fairly small, by comparison, multi-building complex with a large array of garages behind it. I also checked to see if there was any evidence of a demolition near there, but there was not. After that, I put the experience behind me and decided to just move on instead of racking my head about some weird building that made a weird noise. Around November of last year, me and my father made up I started contact with him again. And in January, we go to a football, not American match together, and I decided to stay over at his place for the night because the match ended quite late. It was then I decided to finally wrap up this mystery by confirming if I had either made the facility up or it had simply just been demolished. I asked my dad on the way home if the building that was currently there had always been there, or was there another one, but he only said he didn't pay much attention, what the F, and never remembered any demolition taking place. The only way of confirming or denying was if I looked out the window in a similar position and height to when I was 5, and that's exactly what I did. I crouched down and looked out the window, and everything was the same as it was, with the exception of the location where the facility once was. It had definitely changed. I chalked my dad's unusual answer to his sometimes forgetful memory, he's getting on for 60 now, and simply concluded that it had been demolished. Story over, right? No, because back in August I was out with a group of our friends, and with us was 2 girls, siblings, one of them a year younger than the other. I had apparently never met before. I didn't think too much until we ended up on a field while one of us went to grab a football we had kicked away before. The 2 began to mention a few things that were kind of familiar to me, and when the eldest sibling, who was my age, walked away for a phone call, one of them mentioned her name, and that's when it clicked. She shared the same name as my childhood friend, and might well be her. Now I wish I could have said we reunited and shared some old memories, but at that point I had basically error 404'd, and it was only when we all split up to go back to our home that my brain managed to reboot itself. Needless to say, I was kicking myself. I met up with my friends quite a lot after that, but every time neither of them were there, so I couldn't confirm my suspicions. And now, with my area under a tighter local lockdown, with the possibility of the UK going back into a national lockdown, I fear I'm gonna have to wait a lot longer to finally put this damn thing to rest.
Again, it's me saying that I've read these stories for over 5 years happily, and I've never had any of these things really happen to me. So reading them is fascinating, and I am not a skeptic. I do believe that there's probably a rational explanation for the vast majority of these, but I mean, not these in particular, but all stories like this. But I'm sure there's validity to something, and there's an energy or something we may not understand with our, brains or mind. Maybe there is some type of energy after we go from this plane of existence. But either way, I appreciate the stories, and talk to you guys tomorrow.
This happened yesterday. I arrived to visit my parents. Soon after my arrival, the cat began having panic attacks. Mom thought it was a toxic candle, so she blew it out. The panic attacks didn't stop. The cat was sitting on my mom's lap and suddenly shrinked into a ball, looking up into a doorway entering the living room with its eyes absolutely fixed on nothing. It then made a fast snorting sound and darted to the basement. I went to bed that night. I never have nightmares. I had a nightmare that a bunch of organ pipes were about to impale me. I woke up, ran to the light, and turned it on, and I slept soundly. The next day, my mom grabbed a stick of sage and went to the basement. We went around methodically, leaning each room with and convincing hiding spot, saying incantations such as evil spirits, malevolent beings, and negative energies are not welcome in the house and are hereby banished. My mom began to hurt, so I took it up. I stoked the sage lightly and it exploded in my face, sending embers into my eyes, etc. I composed myself and we got to the ground level. We were almost complete. As we neared completion, the sage began to pop and glow bright red. The sage burst into flames, and at the same time the fire alarm went off. My mom thinks whatever it was tried to distract us from completing the smudging. The fire alarm was not from the smoke, but had to do with a fault in the walls of the house. My mom thinks I brought something over, and indeed before my trip I was beginning to fall into a depression and was questioning whether I was falling into a psychosis. Right now I've never felt so alert and clear-headed, and it does feel like something negative has left me. My boyfriend and I did a short hike to this dam that was built about 100 years ago and was supposed to be a structural marvel. Last time it was used was during World War I, and there were local stories about the area being haunted because there were multiple people who drowned in the area that were never found. We were told by people that we should be quiet in the area as to not wake the spirits. My boyfriend thought it'd be funny to yell out random shit and see if something happens. Next thing we know, the water from the dam starts gushing faster. The winds were blowing really hard, and we started hearing random noises in the jungle. I was freaking out, but my boyfriend doesn't believe in the supernatural, so he thought it was just a sudden gust of wind. I don't know what it was, but I just had this gut feeling to get the hell out of there. Grabbed my boyfriend and we bolted out of there. The whole thing, we were hiking out of there. I had a heavy feeling in my chest. I didn't feel it go away until I got into the car. To this day, I still think about what it might have been, but my boyfriend is unaffected. I come from a family of healers and sensitives, so I've had paranormal and supernatural experiences all my life, as has the rest of my family. However, I have never been as creeped out or unnerved by any other experience as I was with this one, and if I do ever think about it, which I try not to, it still gives me slight anxiety and gives me goosebumps. When I was 12, we lived with my auntie, uncle, and younger cousins who were 7, 5, and 3. I had to share a bed with the 3-year-old. She was a really smart little kid, big vocabulary for her age, and an imagination to match. One night we were laying in bed and suddenly she started crying and pointing at the corner of the room furthest from us. The only light was the street light outside. I said, "What's wrong, Jay?" "What's there?" I wasn't able to see anything, not even a spider, which I thought it was. My baby cousin said through tears, "The witches are looking at us, they are mean." I was freaking out inside by then, and as I still couldn't see anything, so I asked her, "How many witches can you see, Jay?" She answered, still crying in my arms, "There are 3 and they are coming." I started to feel slightly unnerved by this, as obviously my baby cousins weren't allowed to watch scary film programs or listen to scary stories, especially at 3. So this came out of the blue. All I could do by this time was to distract my baby cousin by telling her I wouldn't let the mean witches get her, and singing her nursery rhymes until she fell asleep in my arms. I didn't sleep at all that night. LOL, my cousin is now a beautiful, successful student teacher, and like a lot of people, talk about our childhood, she remembers a lot of the things we did together, but she never remembers that night. I live in a small town, so there isn't a lot of traffic, but I live close to the town center, so I'm used to seeing people I don't recognize come around my street. Just a few weeks ago, right after dark, I was walking my dog, and we come to a well-lit intersection with no sidewalk crossing the 3-lane street. I see an elderly woman with short white hair and a sweatshirt standing on the opposite corner from me. Mind you, the building she's right next to is an old church-turned-rundown art gallery that I rarely see anyone come to, especially during COVID. And my dog started tugging at the leash and growling and barking at her, which is already out of character because he really only pays attention to other dogs or animals and bald men, go figure. So I don't want to alarm her, I just keep walking, hoping that he'll calm down, even though I was considerably concerned about her being outside alone, just staring at the street. So a few seconds go by and I look back and she's not there. I have a clear view down all of the streets from the intersection, and it's damn near impossible she could have gotten out of that range of vision that fast. I didn't see any cars come by, so she couldn't have been picked up. Now, every time I go down that way with my dog, he inexplicably starts pulling and barking toward that street corner. I don't believe in the occult or anything, but this is just so strange. Shortly after my grandmother passed away when I was around 14 or 15, I started experiencing these weird feelings in my house. After the funeral, whenever I was alone in a room, I'd get these random blasts of cold air and the awful feeling of someone malevolent watching me, like something was glaring at me from across the room and wanted to hurt me.
I remember getting out of a hot bath once, and with the door and window closed, the bathroom was full of steam, but I still walked into a cold patch. Sleeping at night was the worst, like whatever the presence was just got stronger. I never once thought it was my grandma, because she was as sweet and mild as anything with me, but I didn't know who it was. Eventually it got to a point where I ended up grabbing a pendant from Lourdes that I had hanging on my bedpost and sending a prayer to whoever was listening to make the thing go away, and it worked amazingly. I've never been particularly religious, and due to the lack of physical manifestations beyond cold spouts, I do believe that this could have just been a weird subconscious reaction to grieving my grandma, who I was very close with. But I'll never forget that I was told my mom all about that months later. She casually mentioned that at times of emotional despair, spirits can attach themselves to people, and that something probably followed me home from the cemetery after the funeral. Fair to say I was a bit gobsmacked at that response, considering her reaction to all things supernatural is just to ignore it and wait for it to go away. My room is absolutely tiny, and on top of that, my parents have to walk through my room to get to the attic, which is where their room is. To give me at least a little bit of privacy, there's a long curtain in my room between the area that has the door and attic stairs and the part where I sleep and hang out. I could send an image if anyone wants to get a better idea. Too bad my parents just ignore the curtain and open it up when they go to their room to see what I'm doing, but that doesn't matter for the story. I've often seen that curtain move as if it's swaying in the wind, but I never have my window open because I don't want any insects to come into my room, and I've never ever felt any breeze coming from the attic, even on days when I clearly saw the curtain moving. Also, I've only ever seen the curtains do that at night, when I was already in bed. Another creepy but not mysterious thing I've experienced was while I was at work. I was a paper boy, so I wake up at 4:30 a.m. and am outside in the very early morning where nobody is around and it's pitch black outside. I was delivering newspapers in a street that runs parallel to a brook, over which there is a footbridge and then another street on the other side of the water. The latter street is sort of like a cul-de-sac. As for cars, the street doesn't go anywhere, it just stops in a residential area. I was right across the street from the footbridge when I heard what sounded like screaming coming from the other side. I recorded these noises, so again, if anyone wants to hear, I'll upload it and send a link. It really distracted me, but I tried to continue my newspaper route. Eventually, as the noise came closer, I realized the noise might be a cat, and then not much later I saw a black cat coming toward me on said bridge. Despite the fact that I knew what the noise was, I was still a bit startled. I biked a little bit further to the next address and turned around to see the silhouette of a person sticking out over a tall bush. The person looked a bit too small compared to everything else to be immediately on the other side of the bush, and instead looked like they were a few meters back, if that makes any sense. So it looked like the person was at least 3 meters tall or something like that. Considering I was still on edge from the screaming noises the cat made, this really startled me. Before I realized what I was seeing was one of those for sale signs in front of a house, which had a cutout of a person on top of it. And in case anyone is wondering, yes, I did take a picture of it in the dark, so I could also show that.